Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tony's Fireside Chat. And I'm really excited to have Abraham, I should say, Chomali on the podcast. Abe, welcome to Tony's Fireside Chat.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony. I'm glad to be here.
Listen, could you please, give us some background about yourself? I know you've got a great history. Give us some things that are going to get us excited.
Oh boy, depends how far back you want to go. Um, so if we go all the way back, or almost all the way back, um, I started selling in 1991. Even before there was a World Wide Web, I was selling things out of the back of magazines. We'd put ads in the back of magazines and get phone calls from people who wanted to buy like cameras and accessories. Of course, that only lasted so long before the internet came along. And basically, around 1999, we started selling on our own websites. It started out with Yahoo stores, turned into our own website with Google. And of course, the other platforms came around, but it all came back to Amazon, of course. Since 2009, I was selling on Amazon. And about 3 years ago, I started helping some people with their accounts. And that turned into an agency. So for the past 3 years, I've been managing ads for people that sell on Amazon. And of course, as we've discussed on all different platforms, the advertising connects to everything else. So I do a little bit of everything, but mostly managing ads. We fix listings, we track different issues and things that come up, we optimize content in different ways, but it all comes back to managing the advertising and managing it effectively for what people need. So that's sort of how I got to where we're at today.
Let me ask you this, going back even further, did you always have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit in you, or it just came? Like, how did that work?
So I don't know that I had the entrepreneurial spirit. I think I always wanted to be a lawyer. And as I went through college, I saw people that were a couple of years ahead of me becoming lawyers and just hanging around. In the early 90s, there was not much happening in the new lawyer world, and the opportunity came up to work while I was in college. That's how I started selling, as a side job while I was in college. And I was making more than friends who were being lawyers were making. And I said, this seems to be where I fit a little bit better for the moment. And life sort of takes you on its own path. We can make the best plans and see where we'd like to be in 20 years. But as life develops, we sort of have to adjust to the way things work. And that's sort of where it went for me. I became a little bit better at selling. I started doing more things where the place I was working needed me. I started doing the print ads where I was working. And I sort of liked the world of advertising. I like doing things try and convince people that you were a good place to purchase from. Showing your value was important to me, and showing your value in a way that was more effective than the competition was always really interesting to me. Using the right words, using pictures that were in the right angles or with the right lighting, seeing who was the best at what they did and trying to either copy or improve on what they did. It was always interesting to me, and I tried to find ways to innovate. And like I said, I might have had the plan of being a lawyer when I was in 10th grade, but 30 years plus later, I'm in a completely different world. So that's sort of, it's sort of something to keep in mind. And when I have my own kids, I try to tell them to have the foundations to be able to do anything well. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let me ask you this: what type of books would you recommend? Is there any things you can remember that have really helped you on your journey?
So let's see. In terms of books, I like to read biographies. I like to read about people who have had challenges and who have adapted to those challenges to achieve a lot of success. So the Steve Jobs book is a great one. It's an interesting perspective behind the scenes from a person who was really, really knocked down a bunch of times, but really also followed his vision to get to where he wanted to be. So biographies, Benjamin Franklin's biography is fascinating to see how he came from his earliest roots to be one of the people who are the foundations of America. There's a bunch of people who resonate And for each person, I would recommend finding the type of biography that resonates with them and learning about how people have adapted to the world before them and emulating it. So biographies are important. I read tons of business books because I'm always trying to improve on the perspective and how to adapt to the world around me, how to make my business better. Of course, the internet gives me a lot of detail on what to do with my Amazon ads, but it's not always so helpful when it comes to the business end of things. So I try to read and I try to learn different ways to make my business better. And besides that, besides those books, I do a lot with podcasts. I highly recommend the MF podcast. It's from somebody named Andy Frisella. He's fantastic. He 3 or 4 years ago, he came up with the idea of wanting to help people with their drive and their focus in terms of achieving business success. And he had a podcast that ran for about 4 or 5 years. And that has helped me tremendously. There have been times where I have had challenges, and listening to him talk about overcoming his own challenges has been amazing. I've heard him talk about what he does when he's at the top and he worries about slacking. And that's also fantastic. It really gives you perspective. And he, of course, mentions other podcasts that there's tons of things that you can listen to. As many hours in the day as you have, they can fill it up with podcasts to listen to. But he was really, really foundational. And even today, there are certain episodes that I have bookmarked that when I'm having a rough day, I can listen to those and really it takes me far in getting past those tough moments.
Wow, that's very inspirational, because it's the same way when I started Amazon 5, 6 years ago. There wasn't a lot out there. And I think I started listening to The Amazing Seller from Scott Volker.
Sure.
And that really sort of helped me out to give me a bit of foundation. Let me ask you this, because you're old school like me. I come from the world of print. And what are the similarities and what are the differences compared to advertising now electronically when we're talking about Amazon or Google?
So I'll tell you, one of the similarities is that the art of spacing images and text is underutilized and underappreciated. There are lots of images that you'll see all over Amazon that are really rough. They use default fonts. They use, it's a poor use of color. And when you look at it, it's hard to read or understand what the person is communicating. When we work with print, if you come from that world, you know that you've got like 2 square inches and you've got to communicate things effectively. You have to decide what thing is the most important that you want to communicate, whether it's a price or whether it's a feature or whether it's new or whether it's a closeout. You want to communicate that thing really quickly because you only have a moment before they flip to the next page. And any other supporting things, you want to communicate that within the space, but make sure you know what's most important and what's less important. With Amazon and with internet graphics in general, that's almost like a lost art. You see stuff that's really, really messy, and people come to product pages and they leave them just as fast because they see that the images are not good. It's gotten better as Amazon has done a better job of clearing out content that doesn't perform so well. The worst offenders in terms of what looks good also sort of fade away. You know, they tend not to sell and they tend to fade away. And graphic design has gotten a little bit better, but there's still a lot of improvement that's necessary.
No, I totally.
It's also an opportunity because if you do it right, you really can take a lot of space easily.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: was advertising costs increasing dramatically, on Amazon and Google? Is it still possible for newer sellers to come in and be successful, or do they have to change your strategy? What would you recommend?
The best thing that I can say is to, if you're starting new, make sure you're selling things that have good margins. It sounds simple, but a lot of people don't. They see something that that costs them $10. They think that they sell it for 13 and they're making $3 or 30%. And if they sell X amount of units, they'll do great. Oh, if I sell 200 of units of this, that's $600 a month. And if I have 5 products like that, I'm doing fantastic. The problem is that leaves you no room for anything that doesn't go right. So if a shipping cost goes up, you're done. If ad costs go up, you're done. One of the best things you can do is try to find products which give you 40, 50, 60% margins right from day one. And what that'll allow you to do is it will allow you to absorb headaches within that margin. So when a container goes up in price to get it from China, and all of a sudden it costs you like 6% of your margin, you've got the 6%. When ad costs go up 40%, you've got the 40%. Ideally, you don't want to have to absorb those things. You're much better off making adjustments that will correct in other ways if you could, finding a different way to ship, or finding a more effective way to advertise, or finding a new market for your product where you aren't beat up on price. Of course, that's always going to be the best option for you within your business. But when you get beat up, having margin is going to be the protection for your business. You've got to start with it to have it to work with.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, because what I've noticed, especially when it comes to advertising on Amazon, the amount of changes we've seen in the last year is more than the last 5 years. And like, can you walk us through some of those changes, and where do you feel there's opportunities?
Oh boy. So the biggest changes are really straightforward. Number one, Amazon is dedicating more and more and more of the page to ads. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
There, it's very easy to scroll and scroll and scroll and not even hit an organic listing. You'll start out with the banner across the top. You'll start out with anywhere from 2 to 6 or more sponsored product placements. You'll have a video. You'll have Amazon recommendations. If Amazon is in that group themselves, if they're selling that product that you sell also, you'll have a bar of Amazon's own branded choices. And all of that is showing up before your own listing itself, your first organic listing. So one of the biggest changes is that Amazon is monetizing that page more and more and more, and it's going to continue. It's true of the product page. It's true of stores. It's true of every part of Amazon. They want to make extra money besides whatever things are being sold. They want to make that an ad money as well. If you know that and you are sharp about how you adjust, you'll be able to hold your little spaces there. It's a way to adjust for those costs going up, because at the same time that those costs are going up, there are extra ways to take advantage. So if you use placement modifiers, you will push your spend towards the most effective ways to be at the top of ads while not spending as much for things that convert less. If you're on top of your conversion rates, you really will be able to make sure that as your conversion rates go up or down, you're adjusting what your listing looks like to take advantage of every shopper that actually does end up on your page. So you want to do those things to take advantage. It's only going to continue. Just yesterday, I posted about a new metric that Amazon is showing in a few accounts, which is top of search share. So if you have 100 clicks or 1,000 impressions, Amazon will tell you how much of that is top of search for you, as opposed to the other spots. The idea in showing that is really simple. Amazon wants you to spend more to be at the top of search. It's no secret there. But at the same time, if everyone is really overspending for top of search, you might want to hang back and let them spend themselves out. Or you might want to realize that these people will, in a lot of cases, be running out of their budgets mid or late in the day. And you can grab 2, 4, 8 hours of the day where you can slide in for a lower cost. If you hold yourself and hold that, have that self-control. At the same time, if you have a product where you really want to be top of search and you don't even know how well you're doing, this is Insight, which will help you get there. In particular, one of the things which is really going to be important and which is really illuminated with this metric is how your own brands are doing or how your own campaigns are doing. So if you have a product, for example, if you're selling Wegmans brand product and you're advertising the term Wegmans, you might be a target for other brands that are trying to get searches for Wegmans. But of course, you are the most relevant brand for yourself. You're the most relevant for your own searches. You're going to do anything to be at top of search for that because you'll convert the best. Having that metric and knowing how much of the time you have your own brand name is going to be really important, even more so than some of the other placements. You want to make sure you're protecting your own space on Amazon.
Do you still recommend people in their listings put the brand name at the front, right, of the listing, as Amazon suggests, or they avoid that and use that space for other things?
I generally recommend it. It's a good thing to have an attractive brand name. I probably don't recommend doing it if your brand name has 17 characters and is hard to pronounce. But if you have a good brand name, I recommend putting it at the beginning of the listing. It's part of Amazon's recommendations, and it's part of their recommendations for years now. So there is a reason behind it.
Yeah.
It's also part of what distinguishes you. So if you're on a page with 25 bookmarks or 25 massage guns or 25 of some other product, and everybody has a completely generic name, which just starts out with the features, putting your brand name at the beginning is going to be a way to differentiate you. And if the brand name sounds nice, you will do well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can tell you at the beginning of the year, I had a brand come to me and they were completely undistinguishable from their competition. The only thing they had was an amazing brand name, like really an amazing brand name. It was perfect for its category, and for some reason, nobody else had come up with something as clever. I said, I like this brand, and I feel like it has a lot of room to market. Um, we pushed that brand from zero to $200,000 a month in like 90 days, and they've been growing ever since. And we've been optimizing performance nicely since then. And really, their content is good. I mean, obviously, they spent the money to create good listings. They have deep inventory, which is important. Their product ratings are good. All those are like baseline. You have to be doing those things right. But their hook is that they have a great brand name, like a really, really great brand name,
Mm-hmm.
and people like it.
No, that's a great example of usually I've heard, a different sort of strategy where people are saying, well, nobody usually knows your brand name, so why use up that valuable real estate? And I think that's a perfect example of doing the opposite, really.
Nobody might know your brand name, but the brand name is part of what will make people comfortable with you. So people, even with a brand name they don't know, or even in a product space where they don't recognize the brand names, they still want to feel like they're dealing with somebody real. And when the listing name is completely generic, as opposed to a brand that sounds like it exists, but you just haven't come across it yet, that's going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we start to buy something new, like when I was buying my first barbecue, I didn't know the brands. I knew Weber and I knew nothing else. As I started to look around, you start to see and learn the brand names, and you start to see and feel what the personality is of those brands. And that happens in jewelry, it happens in cell phone cases, it happens in all different product areas where you want to feel like you are connected to a brand that has a presence. And the first part of that presence is sounding legit.
Abe, you're connected with so many sellers. What are the sort of issues that they're facing nowadays?
So the number one issue is the one where I have the least ability to help them, which is the shipping inbound restrictions and the storage restrictions.
Yeah.
I have conversations about it all day. Unfortunately, I don't have guidance on it. It's really just dribble in the goods as you are able to, and make sure you are prepared to do seller fulfilled shipping, especially as the holiday season comes. By far and away, that's the number one issue. Issues with hijackers, I feel, are getting better. Issues with Chinese brands and sellers doing all sorts of underhanded tactics, I actually feel is a little bit better than it was a year ago. And it's very likely because Amazon is taking a tougher and tougher stance on upholding the rules for what needs to be on Amazon. So a lot of those things are getting better, but at the same time, the shipping issue is getting worse. When inbound containers cost 10x what they costed a year ago, people have issues.
What are the issues that they're facing specifically in regards to Amazon advertising?
The issues, so I'll tell you, it's interesting because I deal with dozens and dozens of sellers. I don't think that there is any one issue.
Okay.
Different types of selling have different restrictions. Different types of selling have different targets for what constitutes success. So if you're selling a product which is a replenishable, like a supplement, you will be perfectly okay with a very high ACOS as long as you're getting enough conversions for people doing subscribe and save to turn one sale into a dozen units. So somebody will have an 80% ACOS, but if they're selling 10 units over the course of a year, the lifetime value turns that cost into 8 points instead of 80 points when that ACOS is there. Somebody else might have a very low margin, but a product with a very high conversion rate, like Hershey's chocolate bars, for example. Whenever somebody is searching for Hershey's chocolate bar, that's it. They're not buying any other brand in most cases. The challenge there is to make the advertising happen at a very, very low ACoS. You need a 3 or 4 point ACoS because your margins are only 10 points in a lot of cases. That's the trade-off of selling wholesale. You've got lots of sales volume available, and you've got tremendous, fantastic conversion rates, but you've got very low margins in exchange for that. So
Yeah.
that's a completely different challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges over time with advertising is just keeping track of what success looks like. In a lot of cases, sellers will change what success looks like. So sometimes they'll say they want to drive sales and they're not so worried about cost, and they'll worry about the cost later once they get to a certain sales volume. But knowing exactly when to make that shift can be tricky. Or they'll decide that they want a certain keyword rank or a certain subcategory rank. And as they get closer and closer to those achievements, they'll reevaluate, and then they're not sure if that's exactly right for them or for their product. So we try to help sellers figure those out in each situation.
Mhm. I think you told me before that you're not selling on Amazon anymore, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and I think, do you feel that gives you an advantage? Because a lot of times people are worried about where is people's sort of loyalties if they're spending a lot of their time on their business or their agency and things like that.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if it's an advantage. I don't think of it as an advantage or not an advantage. Having, 27 years of selling experience gives me certain body of knowledge, which is universal. Knowing how to interact with other businesses, knowing how to interact with the platforms, that is useful for me as an agency. Um, it's definitely something where I find it hard to understand how people can do a lot of selling and also run any sort of service business, simply because the work of selling is tremendous. You have 15 different angles you have to take care of. Everything from customer complaints to inbound goods to manufacturing to replenishment to customer service. I mean, there's tons and tons of things to deal with. And as a service provider, you also have tons and tons of things to deal with. Whether it's your employees or metrics or individual clients, there are all sorts of things to deal with. And for me, I can't imagine how somebody would be able to juggle those two completely different worlds. Yes, of course, they have certain things in common, which in the end is the sales of the product or what a listing looks like, but the rest of it is really not overlapping at all. So I can't see how anybody does it. The loyalty issue, I think loyalty only comes into it as a factor if an if a service provider was selling exactly the same thing as what they're offering as a service. So if somebody is selling a pizza slicer themselves and then they have a client who's selling a pizza slicer, yeah, there might be an issue there. I could see it very easily, them using their data to help themselves. But on an agency level, um, it often comes up that I'll have two people selling products that compete directly with each other.
Mhm.
And I'll tell both clients, listen, I have more than one seller in this space. There's a reality in which every seller's individual data is kept completely confidential. I
Yeah.
mean, listen, in all the times we've interacted on social media, I've never mentioned a seller by name or any specific seller details. But at the same time, the things I run into with individual sellers and the things I learn as I work on things helps me across my whole agency. And I try to find the trends which I can leverage in product categories and product groups. And if I learn one thing, yes, I'll use it to help every one of my sellers. But the flip side is a seller might say, hey, you're going to use the things that you're learning with me to help someone else. And I say, you get much more out of this than you're losing, because you're getting the benefit of what of what I learned with 37 other people is all coming to you, as opposed to the flip side of it. So it actually ends up working out very well as a service agency.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's more of a time issue. I'm always wondering how can they do everything, and it's great to see that you're so focused. Let me ask you this. At what point should somebody consider using an agency as opposed to doing it themselves?
So the simple point in time is when they don't have enough time to do it themselves.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough time to do it yourselves and you have the financial resources to be able to pay for it, that's the right time to do it. I probably don't recommend it on day one, because I am a strong believer that you should at least know what's happening before asking somebody else to do it for you. Either understand what they're doing so that they can, so that you can understand what they're doing as they do it for you, or at least understand that you're not able to do it so that you can find somebody that you'll be able to work with. But one way or another, try doing those things first. You know, when it comes to shipping, for example, I strongly recommend everybody close a few of their own boxes before hiring somebody else to do it. That way, you know whether that person should be able to close 4 boxes an hour or 44 boxes an hour. But if you've never done it, you don't even know how to judge someone else. Comes to the same thing with all the other businesses and all the other services. Try it yourself, get an idea of what you should be able to expect, and that'll give you a good guidance on who's the right person to work with.
You know what? I wanted to ask you this in terms of like PPC in general, in terms of and software. How do you feel about this? Because I felt that software can only do so much, that you literally have to manually go in there and look at things, and that's very time consuming.
So software is definitely not the band-aid to fix all the issues in your business. Um, I use multiple softwares to handle my business with clients and with sellers. And I can tell you now that in every single case, it comes down to how we use the software. A software might have a whole bunch of features when you log in on day one, but the way you use those features can make you completely different than someone else using the same software. I've had clients come to me that are using the same software as I use, but they use it in a completely different way, or they're missing a feature that they didn't realize they can get to by clicking 3 different layers away. And by just even pointing it out, they get extra performance out of it. Or by me implementing a slightly different structure for advertising, I can pull better results for them out of the same software or my own software. But yeah, it comes down to how you implement the software, much more so than what the software actually is.
Right. No, I agree. Well, you know what? This has been really, informative. I really appreciate it. What's the best way to sort of contact you?
So the best way to contact me is probably by putting my name into the social media channel of choice. If you're on LinkedIn, you can look for me, Abe Chomali. If you're on Facebook, I am pretty active there. If you're on Clubhouse, I'm talking way too frequently on Clubhouse. So I have my own website also, which is xpstrategy.com. You can sort of see it up there. So I am generally available in almost every platform that you happen to spend time on.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Tony, it's been my pleasure. I